But we didn't have many options for responding to that absence on the national stage. By the time I took up my current position, 5 years later, the world had changed dramatically. Although one of the first interviews I did at the time was with Jan Gomeshi of Q, who introduced me with the sounds of a woodchuck. So much for the NFB's image. Now, previously, as head of programming, I had already been experimenting in the digital realm, working with people like Mark and Matt at Marble Media, Anna Serrano at the New Media Center at the Canadian Film Center, really trying to push the envelope on creating new kinds of work. And then when I came to write our current strategic plan, digital transformation was at the heart of it. But I had no idea how we were going to do it. And here's what I was told. We needed new capital investment, and if we didn't get it, we couldn't do anything. We shouldn't do it because that is not what the NFB was about. We were the film board, and we should stick to what we had always done. Nobody would be interested. Digital was a fad. I was just chasing after empty fantasies. That's just what my friends were telling me. Others intimated that I was single-handedly destroying the place. And then 2 months into the job, I got some news that had everybody nodding at me with that, "I told you so" look. For the previous 3 years, we'd been working, the Film Board had been working with Heritage and Treasury Board for a $6 million ask for capital investment to be able to push forward with digitization of the collection, cornerstone of a digital transformation plan. 3 years. Wasn't quite used to that kind of pace of institutional government and so on. Our minister had signed off, however. Treasury Board officials were completely supportive, and I was told it was a slam dunk. And I thought, great, we're set, we can go. Except that the rules of the game had changed somewhere along the line, and Treasury Board said they would no longer be funding these kinds of capital investments. Nothing to do with the Film Board. It was just an across-the-board decision. Bang, gone. So a lot of people said, I guess that's it. Well, let's just get back to business as usual. Except that business as usual, for me, meant slow decay and death. And I wasn't ready to accept that. So I said, well, let's think about it, and we're going to do some things differently. We're going to fund our digital transformation internally. Not only that, we're going to find economies equivalent to 5% of our total budget and reinvest it in this digital transformation, in accessibility, connecting to our audiences, and in production. 5%, that's about $3 million. And I added, here's the kicker, and we're not just going to do it once. We're going to do it each and every year that I remain as head of the Film Board. 5% a year for 5 years. No new money. Our existing allocation constantly eroding because we're not indexed and we're losing our purchasing power. And we were going to go it on our own. And we knew from the outset that we were going to have to make some very, very tough decisions. And that, in and of itself, demanded a whole new self-discipline. It meant putting in place radically different budgeting and organizational processes. And I'll give you one example. We had a strategic plan, a great plan. We never had an operational plan that took apart the strategic plan and laid out in detail, task by task, how to accomplish our strategic objectives in terms of timing, budget, human resources, and opportunity costs. So Deborah Drisdale, many of you have heard yesterday on the panel, was running that show. And she found software, Mind Map, that allowed us to map everything we were doing. And I mean every single activity. Nothing was spared scrutiny. And it allowed us to map everything against our strategic objectives. And that gave us an immensely valuable tool for setting priorities. And priorities meant that we could make the hard decision about where limited money and resources would go. We made choices. And all along the way, we had to say, we won't do this, but we will do this. And a lot of people were not happy about that because it went against the grain of basically 70 years of institutional ways of doing things and processes and procedures. But the best ops plan, budgeting process, organizational planning would have meant nothing if the creative talent and momentum wasn't there to execute the vision. And I remember early on, I was presented with a proposal for a total revamp of our then site. It was all very professional. A tender had gone out, and we had 3 proposals from big companies. And they were going to come in and do the makeover. And sort of felt like those lifestyle shows, the home or restaurant makeover. They're going to come in, tell us what to do, have everything kind of done for us, hand it up to us on a platter. And I said, gee, I don't want to do that. This is, you know, great what you're proposing. It's certainly among the best and brightest of today. But what I want is tomorrow. I don't want to create a website. Websites, to me, were already passé. I'm interested in creating something else, an experience. And I'd thought a lot about this over the previous few years. I was fully engaged in the evolving digital universe, both professionally, but also privately as an avid consumer of a whole range of content, online content, news, you know, videos, print, research, everything. And I had to go back to some very simple, basic notions. Who are we? What is it we're offering? And how do we deliver on that offer? And fundamentally, always driven by a notion that since I came from the private sector, coming to the film board, I said, how do we deliver service to taxpayers? How do we deliver something that is really important to Canadians? And the trouble with the proposal I had seen was that it homogenized us. It did not speak to the specificity of what we could offer Canadians and the world. It was a corporate offering. And what we had to offer in the end was very simple. A cinema. Come and watch films. Films about who you are. It had to be clear and it had to be immersive. It had to be easy to navigate. Because I understood early on that navigation is not a tool, it's content. It's creative. It's part and parcel of what the content is. And it had to have a level of quality to make it a truly enjoyable experience. Then we had another volatile debate. I insisted that we were going to make the works available for free. I had a distribution division convinced that I was out to kill them. 40% of our revenues come from the educational and institutional market. They were terrified that that would evaporate, as would our home video sales and so on. And there were a lot of mournful faces around. Distribution revenues overall, they account for 10% of our overall budget. And for a small organization like the NFB, the loss of any of that would have a significant impact. Nevertheless, I insisted free for a number of reasons. First of all, you know, I really believed Canadians paid for this. They paid for this. You know, it's their taxes that supported this. So they had to have access to this incredibly rich and diverse collection. It belonged to them. It didn't belong to the institution. I also believed that the more we were seen and available, the more people would want to see. Now remember, I'm coming from a place where the film board was invisible, where people said, does it still exist? We had to be present everywhere, you know, top of mind. And that our primary objective in the short run had to be building the value of one of the great media brands in the world. And finally, I was, and I'm still convinced, that the brand would leverage new business opportunities down the road. And so we made it free, but we made it free by streaming. You couldn't download to own. And in fact, some of those revenue potentials have been borne out much more quickly, in fact, than I ever thought it would.